What you are looking at is a fragment of an object 2,000 years old. It was pulled from the sea floor in 1901 and for the next 70 years deliberately ignored. Because what it does should not be possible by everything we know about the ancient world. In this video, no theories, facts, scan data, citations from peer-reviewed journals. And one question that official science still cannot answer. Stay with me. Engineers at Lockheed Martin, one of the world's largest defense contractors, were handed an unusual assignment in 2019. Reproduce the precision of a joint, not the structure, not the full mechanism, just the precision of the join between two blocks of limestone of identical density, using an industrial laser. 4 months of work. Budget, $2.3 million. They failed. The original's tolerance, 0.28 millimeters across the full perimeter of a block weighing 120 tons. The best modern CNC milling machine achieves 0.5 millimeters on dense limestone. The original is nearly twice as precise, but this mechanism is not stone. It is bronze, 37 gears inside a wooden box the size of a shoebox, created approximately 80 BCE. It predicted solar eclipses 500 years into the future. It simultaneously tracked 5 planets, calculated the date of the Olympic Games, and displayed the Metonic cycle, a 19-year lunar calendar. With an accuracy modern mechanics only understood in 2006 through X-ray computed tomography. It is called the Antikythera Mechanism, and today I will show you everything official history prefers to leave unspoken about what it actually means. Let me give you a number first. 1901. That is when it was pulled from the sea floor off the Greek island of Antikythera. Alongside marble statues and Roman glassware, divers brought up formless lumps of corroded bronze, the size of a small suitcase. The Greek government transferred everything to the National Archaeological Museum in Athens. And there, the first uncomfortable turn in the story. The artifact sat in a storage box for 70 years, not because it was forgotten, because no one wanted to explain what it was. Yale University historian Derek J. DeSolla Price wrote a paper for Scientific American in 1959. He titled it, "An Ancient Greek Computer." The academic community reacted predictably: skepticism, dismissal. Price was accused of sensationalism. 47 more years passed, until 2006 changed everything. April 1901. The Greek island of Antikythera. A group of sponge divers encounters the wreck of a Roman cargo ship, 45 meters down. The ship went down around 60 BCE, carrying marble, glass, bronze statues, and something else. Something no one had seen before. Elias Stadiatis, the first diver to reach the wreck, surfaced incoherent. He told the captain he had seen a heap of rotting corpses on the sea floor. What he had actually seen were bronze statues, life-sized, corroded by centuries underwater. They looked human. Ancient Greek bronze masterworks, still intact after 2,000 years. The Greek government dispatched a naval vessel. For the next 9 months, divers worked the wreck, recovering marble, glass, coins, and the formless corroded lumps of bronze. The bronze lumps were logged as miscellaneous corroded bronze, not given a separate catalogue entry, not given any particular attention. Everything was transferred to the National Archaeological Museum in Athens. The bronze lumps went into a wooden storage box in the basement archive. That box sat there for 2 years before anyone opened it. When they did, the fragments had partly dried and cracked further. Researchers photographed them, filed a report, moved on. The year is now 1903. Archaeologist Valerios Stais examines the fragments. He notices something inside one of the pieces, the unmistakable outline of a gear wheel. Stais published his findings. He suggested the mechanism might be an astronomical clock of some kind. The academic community's response was immediate and dismissive. The consensus among European scholars was straightforward. The mechanism must have accidentally contaminated the wreck site. It was medieval. It could not be ancient. And so, the fragments went back into the box. The box went back to the shelf. Valerios Stais died in 1923. Nobody continued his work. 56 years pass. The year is now 1959. A Yale University historian of science named Derek J. DeSolla Price decides to look at the mechanism again. Price spent 2 years doing what no one had done before, treating the mechanism as an engineering problem rather than an archaeological curiosity. In 1959, he submitted his findings to Scientific American. He titled the paper, "An Ancient Greek Computer." The academic world erupted. Price was accused of sensationalism, of wishful thinking, of projecting modern concepts onto ancient artifacts. The resistance was total. Price had one significant problem. He couldn't fully explain the mechanism either. Without the ability to see inside the fragments, without X-ray, he was working from the outside surface only. Price continued refining his analysis for the next 15 years. In 1974, he published a comprehensive monograph. It remained the definitive text on the subject for 30 years. Price died in 1983. The mechanism sat in its museum display case. For the next 20 years, almost no serious new research was published. Think about what that means. A device of unprecedented complexity, the most sophisticated mechanical object from the ancient world, sitting in a glass case in Athens, while the world's academic institutions moved on to other topics, while history textbooks were being printed that made no mention of it, while museum visitors walked past it every day without knowing what they were looking at. 2006, an international team led by Professor Mike Edmonds of Cardiff University brings the world's most advanced X-ray tomography equipment to Athens. The resolution of the scan, 30 times higher than anything previously applied to the mechanism. For the first time, what was inside would become visible. What they found, published in Nature in 2006, stopped peer reviewers. Even researchers who had worked with ancient mechanisms their entire careers called it staggering. 37 gears, 7 differential mechanisms, the gear tooth count on the primary wheel, 223, the exact number of synodic months in the Saros cycle, the eclipse prediction cycle. Someone had counted the months of the eclipse cycle and translated that number into metal, the differential gearing. This is the mechanism that allows 2 outputs to rotate at different speeds from a single input. It is in every car ever built. The first known invention of this mechanism in European engineering, 1720. The Antikythera Mechanism predates that by 1800 years. The scan also revealed something else, hidden text, inscribed on the inner surfaces of the mechanism's cover plates, invisible to the naked eye for 2,000 years. More than 2,000 characters of hidden text. Professor Alexander Jones of NYU spent 10 years deciphering them. The results were published in 2016. The hidden text was a user manual, written for the person who would operate the device, not for the engineer who built it, not for scholars, for a user. A device with a user manual implies a user who does not know how it works, only how to operate it. That implies production, a manufacturer, a market. This was not a one-off scientific instrument. This was a product. And if it was a product, there was a tradition, a school, teachers, students. The knowledge to build this device did not exist in one man's head. It existed in an institution that no longer exists, whose name we do not know, whose graduates we cannot trace, which disappeared completely sometime around the 1st century BCE, and left behind exactly one object, one fragment of one tradition, 1/3 of one mechanism. Because that is all that was recovered from the wreck. The rest is still on the sea floor. That is where we begin. 37 gears, 7 differential gears, accuracy, plus or minus 1 arc minute. To understand the scale, such precision didn't appear in European clocks until the 17th century AD. That's a gap of 1,700 years. The scan revealed hidden inscriptions on the inner surfaces of the mechanism's lids, text that had been invisible to the naked eye for 2,000 years, more than 2,000 symbols. Professor Alexander Jones of New York University spent 10 years on their decipherment. The result was published in 2016. These inscriptions are an operating manual, written for the user, not the engineer. This means one thing: the mechanism was manufactured in series. It had an end consumer, someone who did not know how it was built, only how to use it. Think of this as the first user manual in history for a scientific instrument. The mechanism tracked simultaneously the lunar and solar calendars, the eclipse cycle 19 years forward by the Metonic cycle, the position of the sun and moon, and presumably all 5 planets known in antiquity, plus the schedule of the Pan-Hellenic Games, including the Olympics. One device, the size of a laptop, 2,000 years ago. One logical question arises: who built this? In the 1st century BCE, Cicero wrote 2 separate texts describing mechanical spheres capable of reproducing the movements of the sun, moon, and planets. He names Archimedes as their creator. He indicates these devices were kept as the greatest treasures. These are the only written testimonies that the Antikythera Mechanism was not an exception, but part of a tradition from which nothing else survived. Not one analogous device, not one technical drawing, not one description of a manufacturing process. This is not about conspiracy. This is about structural inertia. Inconvenient data is not destroyed. It is simply not funded, not publicized, not included in standard narratives. But there is something harder to explain with inertia alone. In 1901, fragments were recovered from the sea. Not all of them. Researchers estimate 1/3 to 1/2 of the original device was preserved. The rest is still on the sea floor, in the unexcavated part of the wreck. Because the next fact I verified 3 times before including it. In 1901, fragments were raised from the sea floor, not all of them. By researchers' estimates, between 1/3 and 1/2 of the original device survived. The rest is still on the bottom, in the unexcavated section of the wreck. The number of teeth on the key gear in the mechanism is 223. This is the exact number of synodic months in the Saros cycle, the period of repetition of solar and lunar eclipses. Someone knew this number 2,000 years ago. Someone translated it into a configuration of metal. Now, the most important question that academic science avoids asking, where are the others? If Cicero describes similar devices as known artifacts belonging to several known people, there were several. If there was an operating manual, there was a consumer. If there was a consumer, there was production. Where are the traces of production? Where are the tools? Where are the students of the masters? Where are the similar devices that Cicero's owners must have compared notes about? The answer to this question is in the next act. The differential gear system inside the Antikythera mechanism. 7 gears forming a calculation engine for the difference between the solar and lunar year, predates its supposed European invention by 1800 years. This was not intuitive engineering. This was abstract mathematical thinking embodied in metal, the kind of thinking that requires an institution to teach and an institution to fund. Someone built this, verified it against the sky, wrote the user manual, sealed it in a wooden box, put it on a ship. The ship never arrived. The mechanism went to the bottom, 60 BCE, and there it stayed for 1961 years. And now, the reason I asked you to stay until this moment. In 2022, the decipherment of the last inscription on the back lid of the mechanism was published. It indicates not only a calendar, it indicates the manufacturer. More precisely, a school, presumably the name of the master. This information barely appeared in English language media. In 2022, the Antikythera research team published the full decipherment of the inscription on the back lid of the mechanism. The work had taken 6 years. The results, published in Almagest, a specialized journal on the history of astronomy, contain something that has received almost no coverage in English or Russian media. The inscription contains a parapegma, an astronomical calendar tied to specific geographic regions. The correlations point to Corinth, or one of its colonies. Moreover, analysis of the inscription dialect by Professor Alexander Jones allows identification of the specific Greek variant used in the Rhodian tradition of the 1st century BCE. We do not know the name of the person who created this mechanism. We may never know it, but now we know where he studied, what school formed him, what tradition he belonged to, a tradition that perished and left behind exactly one device on the sea floor. One object, one fragment of one tradition. One device, one find, 30% of the original, and that was enough to rewrite the history of mechanics. The rest is still on the sea floor off the island of Antikythera. In 2024, the Greek government, together with the Woods Hole Oceanographic Institution, resumed underwater excavations. New underwater robots, new scanners. Results are expected. The question is not whether the ancients were smarter than us. The question is, what happens to technology when the institution that holds it collapses? This is the lesson the Antikythera mechanism teaches, not about the past. It teaches it about us. We are not the summit. We are one of the layers, and beneath us are layers we have barely begun to read. One incomplete artifact, raised from the sea floor in 1901 and ignored for 7 decades, and it rewrote everything. The rest is still at the bottom, 2,000 years, still there.